I've got 5 stories to tell you about how God spoke to me 5 times. I did what I was told, and my life was spared. The first one happened in 1966. It was a cold, rainy night. I was driving up Route 95, pedal to the metal, doing about 65 miles an hour in my Volkswagen Beetle. Out of nowhere, I heard a masculine voice say, "Change lanes." Without thinking, I changed lanes. About 2 seconds later, whoosh, I saw a red floral couch go by. My mind tried to understand what had just happened. Whose voice was that? It couldn't have been God. I didn't believe in him. Who spoke to me? What would have happened if I hadn't obeyed? On the cinema of my mind, I saw a mangled Volkswagen Beetle, and I knew something or someone had saved my life. I pondered what happened and went back to the monotony of the long drive. In the spring of 1967, I was on a mountaintop in Vietnam. I was in the Army Infantry, and it was my first day in the jungle as a combat photographer. It was evening, and I was dead tired. I secured my tent between 2 trees, blew up my air mattress, and unrolled my sleeping bag. We had walked for miles in a valley between 2 mountains and climbed the one at the end. It was a steep mountain of solid stone. It was late evening when I lay down on my sleeping bag. The light filtered through the trees, and I thought, this is not so bad. About that time I heard, I laid there and wondered out loud, what was that? Moments later I heard it again. I could hear shrapnel tearing through the trees. Suddenly I heard the voice, not calm as before, but excited and demanding, "Get out now!" I grabbed my helmet and ran for some boulders near my tent. I dived between 2 boulders and waited. The North Vietnamese were walking mortar shells around our encampment. After 20 minutes, it was over. They wanted us to know that they knew where we were, and they had us zeroed in. There were about 200 of us in that camp, but not one of us was hurt. I went back to my tent, or should I say, what was left of it. It was in shreds. My sleeping bag was torn all to pieces, and my air mattress, well, it was as flat as a fritter. Where my stomach would have been was a piece of shrapnel as large as my hand. I would not have survived if I had remained in my tent. Later, after I had settled down, I wondered, whose voice did I hear, and where did it come from? I pondered for a while and then fell asleep. Moving forward about 6 months, sitting before the company clerk who had filled out a request for my extension of assignment of 6 more months. I was having so much fun flying around in helicopters and camping with the soldiers and taking pictures that I put in a request for a 6-month extension. I put my pen to the paper to sign it when I heard that voice again. "Go home," it said forcefully. I stopped, looked around, and not seeing anyone, I put the pen to the paper again. "Go home!" Now the voice was commanding and angry. I put the pen down and apologized to the clerk. The next day, I was on a plane to Virginia. 6 weeks later, my battalion was in a firefight on a hill in the middle of the jungle that was identified with a number. The battle lasted a couple of days, and more than 200 men were killed and many were wounded. I would have been in the thick of things, popping up with my camera. Again, God saved my life. Hey, if you want more content like this, then please click the like button. Thank you. I was not a Christian at that time. I did not know whether God talked today or ever. I knew absolutely nothing about him. About 15 years later, I was a Christian. I knew that God spoke to people, but I had not heard his voice since Vietnam. It was a beautiful summer afternoon after work. We had just had a summer shower, and the mist was rising from the parking lot where I parked. As I got in the car, I had the strangest feeling that I was not to go yet. So I laid back in my seat for about 20 minutes. Then I asked the Lord if it was okay to leave. I heard nothing and felt nothing. I started the car and proceeded home. I took back roads to avoid traffic and was driving way too fast. As I got to the crest of a hill, I saw a policeman walking toward me carrying a flare. I slammed on the brakes and stopped just inches from a Cadillac which was sideways in the road. If the Lord had not communicated with me, I would have hit that car full speed. My Datsun B210 would have been demolished, and I probably would have died. I have learned since then that God talks to us in many different ways. Here is a bonus for you. 2 videos entitled How God Communicates, Part 1 and Part 2. In the summer of 1982, I was in our prayer closet. Well, that is what we call it. It was our bedroom closet. I was praying about something very important when I was interrupted. Ray, do you want to be one of my ministers? At last, I thought, I have broken through. Yes, Lord, I replied excitedly. Are you going to do it by polluting my air? I was dumbfounded. I knew that the Lord was referring to my smoking habit. I was a heavy smoker. I smoked a pipe and cigarettes. Trying to bargain with the creator of the universe, I said, how about if I only smoke at home? Hypocrite, he responded. Before I could counter, he said, what does my word say? I had just memorized 1 Corinthians 3:16, which says, know ye not that your body is the temple of God, and that if anyone destroys his temple, him will God destroy? I recited it to the Lord, and I realized that I had 2 choices. I could ask for forgiveness and quit, or I could continue smoking and suffer the consequences. I made a solemn vow that after my tobacco ran out, I would never put tobacco to my mouth again. I have kept that vow. 2 years ago, I had my lungs scanned, and they found 2 small lesions on my lungs which were old. The doctor asked if I smoked, and I replied, not in 30 years. He nodded, and that is all that was said. I was convinced that if I had continued smoking, I would not be telling this story today. Now, I ask you a question. I want you to think about it. Here it is. Why don't we hear more about how God speaks to people in this day and age? Here is the answer. Religion has castrated God. In the 4th century A.D., pastors of the religious Christian community started telling their parishioners that God stopped giving his spiritual gifts after the apostles died. They instructed that God no longer speaks because they had his written word. So they said, he does not do miracles. He does not heal. He does not prophesy. In fact, he no longer shares the gifts of the Spirit as described in 1 Corinthians 12, verses 7 through 11. Read the scriptures. They did this because the early church was diluted with pagans and non-believers, many of whom became pastors and teachers. Because of their spiritual condition, God did not give his gifts to them. They could not fake the gifts of God, so they taught that he no longer gives his gifts to mankind. This is history, but these teachings continue today. You want confirmation? Here is another bonus. Click on How to Hear God's Voice by Mark Virkler. I hope that you have enjoyed these stories as much as I have enjoyed telling them. Remember, please like, share, and subscribe. It encourages YouTube to send my videos to more people. I have put my email in the description. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them. Have you experienced a miracle? I would love to hear it. Thank you for your visit. It is truly appreciated.